I want to give a big shout out to my patrons, especially my Kingsguard, which include Henrik, Brendan, Nick, Oscar, Stuart, Josephine, Ikaika, Amanda, RJ, Shad, Nicoletta, Tanner, Jennifer, Frank, Jay, Sarah, Pat, Kevin, Ryan, Michael, Terrence, Wade, Darren, FM, Derry, Boss, Mitch, Sebastian, and Benjamin. Thank you all so much. You're the best. Welcome back to the Fantasy Network, everyone. My name is, of course, Jimmy Nuts, and today we're going to be doing something that I've had an enormous amount of requests for, and that's going over some of the Dresden Files. So I'll be going over the first three books, which are Stormfront, Full Moon, and Grave Peril. Really like these UK editions, by the way. Do not like those US covers. Those skinny paperbacks, me and Alan both hate them. They're terrible. I don't understand how anyone could like them. UK ones are great, but just so you know, this is going to be spoiler-free. I'm just going to kind of give some general thoughts because all three books are different. Obviously, they tell very different tales, but a lot of my general feelings about Dresden and its strengths and its weaknesses tend to kind of stay throughout all three books. So I thought that this was a good way to group them and just to give some non-spoiler thoughts. So anyone can hang around here, whether you're a veteran reader of Dresden or you're not. If you want to know my more in-depth thoughts with spoilers, I'm going to be doing a discussion on Alan's channel, I believe. It'll be with Alan from Library of Alexandria and Sarah from Sarah Reads, which I'm really looking forward to. This is a massively popular series. We all know that this series gets bigger and bigger as it goes and all of that, but I really want to start with my experience. I haven't read Changes or any of the big books, but I do think that the experience varied from book to book in a way that was trending towards more positive for me, because if I had to express my overall feelings of the first three books in one word, it would be okay. And there's nothing really wrong with just an okay book. I think that those are really important, and knowing that the trajectory for me is getting more and more positive is a good sign. These are quick. They're not 900-page chunkers, so I didn't need these to be revolutionary for me. What I wanted to be was entertained. And I gotta say, for the most part, I was. Even Stormfront and Full Moon, which people are really, really negative on, I think I enjoyed them a little bit more than other people, maybe because my expectations were a little bit lower, maybe, I don't know. But one of the main things about Dresden that I really like is that there's this feel to Chicago and the world. And this feeling around Dresden himself, and that is this kind of grungy, dirty, like dim feeling. At least that's what I get. But also, when I say that, it makes it sound like it takes itself serious. But Dresden Files, from what I can tell, does not take itself seriously at all. Maybe not at all, but not too much. You know, a lot of fantasy does take itself very serious. This is kind of a nice little break, little shorter books with case files, right, in that episodic kind of format. So I happen to really resonate with the kind of, I keep calling, it's not grim at all, really. It's more like that dingy, smoky room feeling, the noir feeling. And I really like the break from typical epic fantasy narrative structures to what we get in Dresden Files, which is a more noir narrative. Instead of, you know, having the beginning and a rising action, all that stuff, at noir, we kind of have a whodunit. We have an event that is the catalyst at the beginning of the book, and I really liked all three of the cases. Some people seem to not enjoy one or the other, or some people dislike all of the first three, but I liked every case for the case files in the first three books. And with the noir structure, it is a break from the typical things that we see in fantasy. So getting the big pivotal moment at the beginning and then trying to figure out whodunit with a plot twist in the middle, and then another, you know, rising action right before the climax that leads into the finale, it's fun. It's a good palate cleanser, and a lot of people told me it would be. And I gotta say that I'm almost sad that I hear that it gets a little bit more expanded as you go on. I know it'll be good because I think Jim Butcher always intended that, but I would miss the case file feeling. Also, Harry has a cat. I really like cats. And with this being urban fantasy, not my forte, not a lot of experience in it. I read like Ninth House by Lee Bardugo, which actually I like quite a bit, so maybe I like urban fantasy. You know, with Dresden being urban fantasy, I thought it would be very slow going into the fantastical and the magical and the wizardly. That's not the case. You kind of get you know, just thrown in right into the middle of all these magical terms. You know, you have talking skulls and all kinds of things like that. Plus, you know, the wizard staff. And it has a charm. It has a charm to it, while Harry's also kind of a klutz and kind of a screw-up as well. I like all of the fantastical stuff that's presented in here. I feel like it is, like I buy into it. I don't want to say it's believable, because I don't believe in any of that, right? But I do think that it's presented in a really nice way, and it adds a whole lot of charm to Dresden, who himself is a little bit weird. And this is told from a first-person perspective, so I need to talk about Harry and a lot of the stuff that I liked and that I didn't like. One, most of his humor really resonated with me. Steepling his fingers in a wizardly fashion in Stormfront, I thought that was just hilarious. The fact that when he walks by technology made after World War II, it just seems to mess up. I really like these like little pieces of world building that Jim Butcher adds in here. I think that Dresden being so hard on himself is kind of relatable in a lot of ways. And the fact that he is fallible, for sure, makes him resonate with, I imagine, a lot of people. On the flip side of that, and everyone has talked about this a million times, the way that women are portrayed in the series through Harry's lens, which I think is a very important distinction, it can be a little bit cringy. It is very tiring, and I will say in that aspect, as I liked each book more and more, I also thought that I was hoping that it would maybe kind of subside. Maybe it does. I've heard people say it does and it doesn't, so I don't know who to listen to. But in Grave Peril, I actually thought it was the most egregious, and it kind of took me out just a little bit. There are people who are like Harry in that regard in the world, so it is a real thing, and I don't love it, to be honest with you. I think it is the biggest negative in this book. It's just very eye-rolling, and not in like an offended way, but more of in just like a cringy type way. There was a piece, and I'm not going to spoil anything, with a love potion that I just thought was just rotten. And that was in the first book, so I'm hoping we don't see anything as cringy as that again. But just overall, Harry is complex, and he's certainly fallible, and there are pieces of Harry Dresden, the character, that do great on me. He is not a perfect character for me as a reader at all. However, I do find him to be funny at times. I do think his decision-making, and when it's time to take action, him stepping forth is really cool, and he does seem to care a lot about his friends and the people who stick their neck out for them. Or sticks out their neck for him is what I meant. And that kind of brings me to the surrounding cast of characters. Most of these are hits. Like, I love Bob, which you'll meet him whenever you get into the series. I'm not going to spoil anything, but I am going to mention characters that might show up in book 3. I'm not going to tell you what they do or anything like that, but Michael is a wonderful character. The fact that he's toting around this big sword and just seems so righteous is so fun. I would say Michael might be my favorite character in the series, even over Harry himself, possibly. And I really like Murphy. Murphy is a good, strong character. Obviously it's a little bit of a trope with the detective team, but folks, you're going to have that. It's detective novels, and, with urban fantasy. It's going to happen. And Murphy's cool. The love interest for Harry and the romantic relationship, not really into it. I haven't enjoyed it in the first 3 books really at all. Those are probably the pieces of the books that kind of tend to drag for me, even though these are shorter books. Those are the ones that I kind of struggle to get through. And I think that's why Grave Peril towards the end in book 3, I think it actually went somewhere kind of interesting, but I was not as invested in that ending as I thought I would be. So to talk about, and that kind of goes into talking about the books, right? If I had to rank these right now for the first 3, I would say I think I like Grave Peril the most, then Full Moon, and then Stormfront, which is a very natural progression. I mentioned in a wrap-up that I happen to like Full Moon more than Stormfront, and I thought I was all alone. Turns out I'm not, because a lot of people have read these books, and there's a lot of varying opinions out there in the fandom. So the thing about these books, all 3 that I want to say definitively, is that I love the way Jim Butcher opens up his books. And it's because it's noir narrative style, right? We get something pretty interesting at the beginning generally, and he gets put on the case. I just eat that stuff up. I really do. Now, the endings of these have all ranked from okay for me to meh. With Grave Peril's ending probably being the one I'm most, I don't want to say conflicted on, because I did like it, but I liked it probably, I liked it more in Stormfront, actually. But Full Moon, actually, I think had the best ending, even though I like Grave Peril as a whole more. And that's kind of where I'm at. There's a little bits of each book that I really, really like, but I got the Dresden bug, as they say. Like, I got bit by it and kind of wanted to keep going at the end of Full Moon. And I don't know why. They again, they're very simple tales and whatnot, but I just found myself, like a day later being like, I kind of want to see what the next thing is up for Harry. So that's good. That's really good. And I thought Grave Peril did something different than the other 2 books. And Jim Butcher even says this in the foreword, is that the story starts to open up a little bit more. We start getting a little bit more tidbits of, kind of like the chronological time of the past of how Harry came to be. And that is interesting. Having a wizard in the middle of Chicago that has a complex past is always going to be something I'm interested in. But Grave Peril did start to feel like something bigger was unfolding while still remaining that really fun case file. Grave Peril was also when I started picking up on a lot of the things that I like about Jim Butcher's writing, because I do really like his writing. It is brief at some points, and it is very sharp and to the point and blunt, and you can actually describe a lot of action, which does happen in these novels, but you can also show a passing of time and how slow that time can be in these stressful situations. He does that in books 1 and 2, but in book 3, I really started to notice that he was being able to place things just perfectly in his paragraphs, and then maybe a line between paragraphs to really drive home the point. I would love to give some examples, but everything that I saw that I have marked down, I think does give away a little too much for a no spoiler review, so maybe I'll cover that in the spoiler stream I do with Sarah and Alan. But essentially, he's able to build up on short, sharp sentences in his overall paragraph, and it kind of builds up this anticipation, it crescendos, and then he usually brings it back down at the end of the paragraph with a shorter sentence. And what this does is build a sense of anticipation, then comes down to a driving point that lands home an idea or a feeling relayed by our perspective, which is Harry. And this is something you will see a lot of first-person perspective writers do, and I noticed Butcher doing it in Grave Peril, and I thought it was excellent. So even though he is not the flashiest writer when it comes to like lyrical prose or anything, I do think that he has some excellent sentence placement, punctuation placement, and his writing is really good. That's something you have to kind of say about Dresden. Whether you love him or you hate him, I do think Jim Butcher writes through Harry's perspective, and I do think that Harry Dresden as a character has a voice. Some people hate it, some people love it, but he has a voice. He is sometimes a knucklehead, sometimes he's kind of a hero, but his perspective is strong. The perspective voice is strong in these books, and that's what kind of keeps me into this and keeps me entertained, on top of the fact that I am a really big fan of the noir narrative structure. So with those things all combined, I'm having fun, and this has been a pretty good experience thus far. And I have to say, I felt like each book did get better, even though I preferred book two's end to the third book. I think that these are going to get a lot better. I've heard Summer Night is going to be excellent, and we'll see. I'm very excited that I'm doing this with Alan, and Sarah's way ahead of us, but we'll keep having her on those discussions as well. But going through this with Alan, it's fun to kind of finish a book and say, hey, what did you think? What did you see? What did you like? Because Dresden, while still fairly simple at this stage, is kind of unraveling a little bit into a bigger world and things that we can pick up on. And I find Harry's history to be the thing that I'm most intrigued in going forward. And if there's anything that I can say that surprised me about these first 3 Dresden Files books, I would say it's how much I've really enjoyed the world building around our world, if that makes any sense at all. The fact that it's urban fantasy, but you know, Harry walking by the technology example I gave earlier, but that is so cool. And it's just little things like that that make the world I live in every day that's mundane, maybe a little bit magical to think about these things actually happening. And imagining being in a city where these awful things are happening and Harry's there to save the day. So I'm having fun. They're really good palate cleansers. It's nothing that has blown me away by any means, but I would say it's definitely solid so far. And those are my feelings about the first 3 Dresden books, in the Dresden Files, and I'm excited to continue, and we'll see where I end up, and then when I get to changes, everyone can say they told me so, and I'll be like, oh my gosh, this is wild. It's almost at a point now where changes is so hyped, I'm terrified of reading it, because I almost don't know if it could ever live up to that expectation, because of how often people tell us about it. And I say us, I mean people who haven't read Dresden, and I know me and Alan have talked about this. It's just changes, and I'm like, well, what about everything before? We got to talk about that. But I am excited to get there, and who knows, maybe it'll live up to everything I've ever heard about it, and maybe it'll blow my mind. I hope it does, because I could see myself getting more invested in the characters in the world, especially Michael. Michael's awesome. Point blank, Michael's the best. Hey, thanks for checking this out. I really appreciate it. If you liked the video, think about hitting like, and if you loved it, you can even hit subscribe. I'll be doing more Dresden content here, and I cover a vast variety of other books and have live chats all the time, and I'd love to have you as a part of the channel. There is a Patreon in the description. It's optional, but always appreciated. Until I see you next time, remember to be good, be safe. Remember to always keep turning the page.